my name's Peter Kenny. This is the first in what will be an occasional series of me reading short published horror fiction. Today's reading was first published in the Frogmore Papers, a literary magazine in 2019. It's called The Dream Home. I hope you enjoy it. The night is more painful than the day. By night I'm a misanthrope, hating all those defectors to the Republic of Sleep. I imagine them sprinting across some floodlit frontier into the dark arms of their ten-a-penny dreams. I'm somewhere between Monday and Tuesday. I know I'm not completely alone. Outside there are grey-faced security guards, ashen taxi drivers ferrying drunks into the suburbs, sex workers trading with clients. Then there is the man I hear shouting from the underpass near the train station. Through the small hours he sits in his cardboard castle, his voice ever more hoarse as his ululations grow wilder. Occasionally he becomes intelligible. Among the spattering curses he wails that he wants to go home. I consider what he means by home, for what else does an insomniac have to do with his time other than consider things? Obviously, home is not where the man finds himself now, cocooned in a rancid sleeping bag, ignoring the rivulets of rainwater or urine trickling towards him. Whoever he is my companion, the one person I am certain is as crazed and sleeplessly alone as me. But don't mistake this description of him for empathy. I am far too tired to care about anyone. I am an exile from sleep. No, it's more than that. I am a refugee from sleep. Little did I know, as I lay in my bed, what bliss would come when I had built my dream home. Intending to carve an exit from the sleepless, wide-eyed hours, I began like a prisoner scratching at the wall of my oubliette. Soon, however, I was clawing with delirious optimism. It was working. My first room was entirely imaginary and bubble-shaped. I dragged myself into it, sprawling on my back on the floor. I found I had hollowed a niche free from the disputes of my chattering mind and the hubbub of the city. Overwhelmed with gratitude, I cried in the silent space. Then, like some minor deity, I made stars blink into existence overhead. It was important to know they existed, even though I soon hid them behind a domed ceiling. Each night I proudly furnished my dream home. I created a glowing fire, an armchair, a bookshelf sagging with black-spined books, and an intricate rug of Turkish design. In the domed ceiling I opened a bull's-eye window and filled it with the full moon. Under this window I would stretch out in a cleansing pool of moonlight like a great loose-limbed dog. In those first blissful weeks I could experience whole cycles of sleep. At first the noises were muffled and only faintly intrusive. I would listen, but then hear nothing. Eventually I dismissed them. If there were noises, I'm not too sure they were human. It made me wonder what lay outside, other than the full moon and stars. I resolved to add more windows, for if I had created this interior, I must be able to ensure that my house stood in empty space and far from noisy neighbours. What grand view might a sleeper see from his windows? Darkness, of course, abundant velvety darkness. But I also wanted to know the sea was nearby, with cliffs and perhaps the occasional mourning of a gull I might hear. And in that night what I imagined came into being. Like an artist, I completed a view of the silver path the moonlight made on the sea. Next, I fashioned curtains. It was enough to know the outside had been decided upon, and there should I ever need it. I began building a corridor, softly lit except for a bright painting. I chose Millet's Ophelia, showing a heartbroken woman drifting downstream with her flowers. I called it the corridor of sleep. For every door I made, it opened into a bedroom. Some of them were places I had once slept in. My grandmother's house in the island of my childhood, in Florence, shuttered and marble-floored, just under the cloud line in Chicago, a futon on the floor of a Kanazawa ryokan. In each bed I could cast myself down, tumbling effortlessly into oblivion, with all my dreams jostling around me. Of course my waking life was transformed. The grey veil of exhaustion was lifted. My face changed. The puffy bags and shadows under my eyes were gone. My shoulders hunched less, and I was no longer isolated by fatigue. Best of all, the undreamt madness of my subconscious did not leak out in vile outbursts or spiky interactions. Last night, as I climbed the stairs to my real bedroom, a few people passed noisily on the street outside, but their voices soon receded. The traffic was sporadic. I could hear individual motors in the streets around me. I undressed and slid into my bed. Then I took my mind to my dream home. I was in my armchair with the curtains drawn tightly, the eternal full moon still framed by my round window. Distantly, but unmistakably, I could hear the sea and the sough of wind in pine trees. Then I heard something. A violent coughing, perhaps, or a shout. I started out of my chair, heart racing. It had come from the corridor of sleep, which was growing ever longer and more door-lined. I padded along it towards suicidal Ophelia. Some sensation in my gut told me that an intruder hid behind one of these doors. There, on the left side, one door stood slightly open. No light emerged from it, only blackness thick as molasses, and then an outburst of noise, an enormous voice, throaty and guttural, railing furiously at itself. I pushed open the door, sliding my hand towards the light switch. Then there was light. It was the white chamber, everything snowy and pure, with pristine sheets, the pillows and duvet like clouds. It was an experience I was saving for some special occasion. The man lay fully clothed in the bed. His worn boots were caked, and I could tell the linen was soiled with the filth of the rags that were wrapped around him. "What the hell are you doing here?" I said. "Idiot, did you think this could last?" The way he spoke, wild and rasping, made me think of violence. I did not flinch, for hadn't I made this bedroom? Wasn't it fashioned from a memory of a house in France I had slept in one spring morning? The man sprang from the bed. "I'm having this." "Get out," I said. A mad rage enveloped me. I struck at him. Somehow I twisted his bedraggled head under my arm, and I found I was trying to gouge at his eyes with my thumbs. Only then did I realize the man was already eyeless. Then, slyly, he had twisted free, with bestial strength, shoved me bodily back into the corridor. A lock turned in the door of the white chamber. I had not put a lock there. I stood, dithering, my teeth chattering. Next I was scrambling along the corridor towards the safety of my armchair. Even there I could hear his laughter, or, more precisely, a kind of laughing rage. He was punching the walls and hammering on the wooden panels of the door. The moon was swollen, bellying its craters and seas at the bull's-eye window. The Turkish rug was sodden, and the floor was a puddle from which clawed crustaceans were crawling. Something was buffeting the window. I stood in the noisome pool, my ankles palped at, and I leant forward to snatch at one of the curtains. Through the glass I saw 2 dogs, their black eyes glazed with moonlight. Their howling made my skin shrink. I woke with a choking sob, tangled in my sheets. My clock showed I had been asleep for less than 10 minutes. I needed to shake off a sense of dread. Dressing hurriedly, I walked into the streets. For a few moments I stood alone. Then I heard the man roaring drunkenly in the underpass. "I want to go home!" I had to escape the idea of sleep, for I could never return to the place I had made. I walked the streets for hours. Sometimes I said wild things. Sometimes I was screaming.